Welcome to the Beast Rider Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we're going to be discussing the trade rumors involving Deshaun Watson to the San Francisco 49ers. Now, for those who don't follow my podcast, I like to break it down into three parameters. The first one is who are the players or coaches involved. The second parameter is why the move was made or potentially could be made. And the last but not least parameter is the instant gratification versus long-term gains. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the player. In this case, it's Deshaun Watson from the Houston Texans. There's been a lot of rumors circulating around social media that he wants out of Houston, and it's for good reason in his opinion. And I'm going to break that down right before we get started into the pros and cons of this potential deal with the San Francisco 49ers. So let's go ahead and talk about why he's upset. Well, he's upset because he was under the impression that he would be involved in the hiring process of the next GM. As you know, or if you don't know, Bill O'Brien was the GM head coach, and he was fired midway through the season, which left those vacancies open. They then went ahead and jumped into the New England Patriots coaching tree, and not coaching tree, I guess you would say scouting department. And they went ahead and got Nick Caserio from the New England Patriots, brought him in to be the GM. He was upset. Watson, as in he. Watson was upset. He then put out a tweet saying some things never change. That definitely rubbed him the wrong way. And what you see today is a lot of rumors circling around Deshaun Watson being disgruntled in Houston because he really wants his say. He's a franchise quarterback. He wants some input into the decision making process. And I get it. He's earned it. He's earned it. And so as a player, I can kind of see his frustration because, as you know, they shipped out DeAndre Hopkins to the Arizona Cardinals in exchange for David Johnson. And I believe it was draft picks. But I mean, why would you even make that move? Like, why would you ship out DeAndre Hopkins, who is a wide receiver one, teamed up with your franchise quarterback for Magic Beans and David Johnson? That makes zero sense. That's like pulling quarterback Steve Young and having Jerry Rice be the best quarterback wide receiver tandem in the NFL, and then trading Jerry Rice. Like, Steve Young would be like, "What the are you doing, bro? Like, are you being serious right now?" Yeah. So Deshaun Watson is frustrated in more ways than one, and it stemmed from that DeAndre Hopkins trade. I can tell you that. That goes without saying. Not too many people are talking about that, but come on. Like, who wouldn't be upset when you trade DeAndre Hopkins and get David Johnson in return? Like, what was Bill O'Brien doing? No wonder he's fired. Gone. Out of here. But let's go ahead and talk about why Deshaun Watson wants out. Well, I just talked about why he's disgruntled, but let's go ahead and take it a step further. His offensive coordinator this year and for the past two seasons is Tim Kelly. Now, Tim Kelly was a guy who directed Deshaun Watson and guided him through his years early in his career. And Tim Kelly is a guy that Deshaun Watson really wants to be retained as his offensive coordinator. Well, with Nick Caserio coming in, we don't really know what he wants because it's up to him. He's the GM. He's going to have his own coaching staff that he's going to bring in. He's going to be married to that coaching staff. And if that head coach doesn't want that offensive coordinator, Tim Kelly, there, he's going to be shipped out and a new one's going to come in and a new system's going to be in place. That's just the way the NFL works. So Deshaun Watson is frustrated because he knows that's a great possibility that could happen. All right, so the trade rumors are real. Andre Johnson, former Houston Texans wide receiver. He's an all-pro wide receiver. I believe he was drafted back in 2003, number 3 overall by the Houston Texans. Played for them from 2003 to 2014, I believe, if I remember. Yes. Wow. Yeah, he did. And he actually put out a tweet backing up Deshaun Watson, saying, "If I'm Deshaun Watson, I will stand my ground. The Texans organization is known for wasting players' careers. Since Jack Easterby has walked into the building, nothing good has happened in for the organization, and for some reason, someone can't seem to see what's going on. Pathetic! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point!" Wow, that's some strong words coming from a former player who knows the Houston Texans organization better than anyone. And he's not happy, and he's saying that Deshaun Watson should not be happy. And again, as I pointed out, it stems from the DeAndre Hopkins trade. I believe in my heart that played a role into it, and the GM hiring of Nick Caserio just kind of set everything in motion for him to just go off on Twitter and say something's never changed. All right, but let's go ahead and talk about, should the 49ers make a trade and swing a blockbuster deal for Deshaun Watson? Well, I'm going to dissect the pros and cons, and I'm going to weigh the pros and cons, and then at the very end of those pros and cons, I will come with my decision if I was GM John Lynch on what I would do. All right, so let's talk about the pros. Well, Deshaun Watson, you get a franchise quarterback. Franchise quarterbacks don't grow on trees. That's why you see teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, teams like the Green Bay Packers, teams like the New England Patriots, now the Tampa Bay Bucks with Tom Brady. You see these pure pocket passers and franchise quarterbacks going in deep playoff runs. Without a franchise quarterback, it's kind of hard to sustain a deep playoff run because all the rules are dictated toward the offense nowadays. You can't hit a quarterback in the knees. You can't hit him high. You can't hit him in the shoulder hairline fracture of the helmet. You can't hit him. He's basically untouchable. All right. So with that being said, quarterbacks are getting away with more. So is the whole offensive unit is getting away with whole. So you kind of have to tailor your scheme and tailor your team around the offense. More so it was the defense, but now it's switching over to the offense. But with that being said, you have a dual threat quarterback, right? Now teams are tailoring more toward dual threat quarterbacks because dual threat quarterbacks are what? Every time they scramble outside the pocket, they dive, you can't hit them. You've seen it with Russell Wilson with the Seattle Seahawks. You've seen it with mobile quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs. So you're going to see the trend of the dual threat quarterback coming into play nowadays. Ryan Tannehill from the Houston Texans, Tennessee Titans. So that brings into the picture Deshaun Watson. He's a dual threat quarterback. He can pass, he can run, and more times than not, one quarterback, if you're a dual threat quarterback, you'll be athletic enough to run with the ball and be just okay as a passer. I would say Lamar Jackson is more of a running quarterback than he is a passer, but Deshaun Watson is both. Deshaun Watson is both. I'll break it down to you. He had 4,823 passing yards this year. That ranked first in the NFL. He had a 70% completion rate, or just a little above. I think it was 70.2. That ranked third in the NFL. He had the top two quarterback passer rating at 112.4. You put that all together and you're getting a sound football player who's definitely a winner, but cerebrally gets it up top and can move with his legs and extend the play. Those are things and attributes that every GM covets and looks for in today's quarterback because, again, the rules are dictated toward the offense. So the question remains, does it make sense for the San Francisco 49ers to pull this deal? Well, again, I just pointed out the pros. Now let's peel back another layer of the onion to get to the core. He's a perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's offense. It will allow Shanahan to open up the playbook and allows him to move more naked bootlegs. You don't see much naked bootlegs with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? But if you remember, when Mike Shanahan was the offensive coordinator in San Francisco, you saw a lot of naked bootlegs with Steve Young, and he was basically a player who can either run with the football because you're going across the grain, and you had an outlet, usually to tight end Brent Jones coming across the shallow crossing route, or you had Jerry Rice up top, or you had John Taylor on the other side. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle when you take into account what Deshaun Watson brings to the table. And if you're looking at it from a GM standpoint and from Kyle Shanahan's standpoint, because Kyle Shanahan's going to be the one that's ultimately going to be making the decision because it's his offense, he's going to look at it and be like, okay, well, we can open the playbook with Deshaun Watson. We really know what we're getting with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now GM John Lynch can say we're not looking for a first-round quarterback as of right now. But yeah, who's looking at a first-round quarterback as of right now? The draft is like 3 months away, right? So no one's looking at a quarterback as of right now. But of course, as of right now, things will change later on. So I'm not buying into that. I think they're going to do their due diligence. They did it with Tom Brady in this offseason, even though people were like, no, they're not. Yes, they were. It was reported, and boom, there you have it. Okay, so if I was GM John Lynch, the pros, you can trade Jimmy Garoppolo, you bring in Deshaun Watson, you trade Jimmy Garoppolo back to New England Patriots for a third-round pick. That's something I pointed out in an earlier podcast, and I just included that in the description below so you can kind of catch up on how this podcast ties into my earlier podcast, and then you can connect the dots that way. All right? So you ship him off to New England, you get a third-round pick in return, and then whatever the pick may be, second, third round pick, I don't know, whatever draft capital you get in return, and then you're saving the team $24.1 million in cap savings. When you get savings of a $24.1 million cap hit savings. You can use that money, allocate it toward players like left tackle Trent Williams, so he can protect Deshaun Watson. You can also find bargain players who added value when they were healthy, like K'Waun Williams, because K'Waun Williams opens up the playbook, just like Kyle Juszczyk opens up the playbook on the offense side of the ball. So you're getting key components of your core schemes intact because you can re-sign these other players based on letting Jimmy Garoppolo go. And you're still getting a franchise quarterback in return. So those are those are the pros to adding Deshaun Watson in San Francisco. But here's the problem. All right, now let's look at the cons of this deal. All right, Deshaun Watson just signed a 4-year, $160 million extension, and he has $111 million in guaranteed. Yeah, $111 million in guaranteed money. Meaning, if the Houston Texans were to move on and trade Deshaun Watson, they would absorb a cap hit of $5.6 million to play for another team, San Francisco or someone else. When you take that into account, does it make financial sense for the Houston Texans to make this deal? Not likely. Because if I'm a GM, Nick Caserio, I'm looking at, okay, well, why would we want to give up our franchise quarterback and then be stuck with a $5.6 million cap hit to watch him play for the San Francisco 49ers? It makes no financial sense. And if you're doing the math, that's $21.6 million in dead money minus Deshaun Watson's cap hit for the upcoming 2021 season, which is 15.9. You do the math, that comes out to, $5.6 million in cap hit that the Houston Texans would absorb. So it doesn't make much sense, right? So if you're Nick Caserio, you want what? Obviously, you want the number 12 overall pick. You want that 12th pick because there's a lot of holes on the Houston Texans, and they need all the draft capital they can get. So aside from a draft capital of a first rounder, like a 12th pick overall, if I'm Nick Caserio, first round picks are not guarantees. Everyone talks about first round picks. So we need first round picks, 2 first round picks, 3 first round picks. I see all these things on Instagram, Twitter, and we should give up Deshaun Watson for a 2 first round picks, one in 2021, one in 2022, and then maybe a third round. No, if I'm Nick Caserio and this is my first blockbuster deal in Houston, I want draft capital, but more importantly, I want an all-pro player, not a Pro Bowl type player, an all-pro player, and that all-pro player would be Fred Warner. Now, if you were to watch my earlier podcast, I talked about this very scenario playing out because we saw what happened to DeForest Buckner, who wanted $20 million a year. What do you think Fred Warner wants? He wants $18 to $20 million a year in a front-loaded deal. I broke it down in an earlier podcast, 3 earlier podcasts. I included that in the description below, so you can go ahead and connect the dots again on how this podcast relates to those. But I was the first one to point that out, and Richard Sherman even admitted it later when he was asked the question on if he was returning. He said, there's not enough money to go around, which is true. Okay? So, if I'm Nick Caserio, I want the number 12 overall pick, but I want an all-pro player. Not too many all-pro players are on the San Francisco 49ers outside of maybe Trent Williams, Fred Warner, and Kyle Juszczyk. So when you obviously Nick Bosa, but he's injured. We're not talking about injured players here. But aside from that, yeah, give me Fred Warner, give me the 12th overall pick, and maybe we'll make this deal. But that's something that I don't want to happen because Fred Warner is too valuable to the 49ers organization. But again, it's something and a possibility that could take place. We just don't know how it's going to play out. All right. So we saw the pros, we saw the cons. Now, if I'm GM John Lynch, would I make this deal? On one side, you get a top 5 franchise quarterback, right? But on the other hand, you're losing a franchise player and the heart and soul of defense. Am I willing to give up my top 2 players in back-to-back years coming off a Super Bowl run when I just got rid of DeForest Buckner, who was the heart and soul of the defense? Then this year, it had to be Fred Warner. Then he was the heart and soul of the defense. That's a tough power play move to make because the Bay Area media is going to be all over it. The fans are going to be all over it. And the feedback that I'm getting from fans off the record in terms of like just going to the gym and talking to them because they're talking to me about it. If I'm GM John Lynch, I'm not making this move. I'm just not making this move. And the reason I say I'm not making this move is because these are the moves that gets GMs hired or fired. And if I'm GM John Lynch, I'm looking at it like this. If you're looking at the locker room dynamic and you get rid of the best players on your team and bringing in newer players, who what does that send as a message to the rest of the team? Both players were drafted by the 49ers, mind you. And if they got rid of DeForest Buckner and then traded Fred Warner, if I'm a player, I'm looking at it like, man, the better I get, the more trade value I am and exposable. Is exposable a word? The more, dispensable I am. That's something that you have to take into account, because now you're looking at it from a personal standpoint, saying, I bled my heart, and bled, heart, tears, everything like that. Blood, sweat, and tears, as they would say. I'm kind of losing my mind, but my blood, sweat, and tears, as they would say, the cliche that's being used, swung around. That's something that holds true and holds weight. DeForest Buckner even said it. He said, he was kind of hurt that the 49ers would trade him after he sweated it out, was with the team during the down years, blood, sweat, tears, and then they ship him out. And what did he do? Oh yeah, he was an All-Pro this year, by the way. So yeah, was he worth the money? Absolutely. And I said that in an earlier podcast on why the move was dumb. And people were like, nah, you're wrong. Now the same people are like, damn, dude, you were right. Yeah. More times than not, I am right. All right? So that's that. But getting back to the decision, do I want Deshaun Watson over Fred Warner, basically? All right? Because we don't know what the draft capital of the number 12 overall pick is going to yield. So let's just do one-on-one. That's a tough decision. I'm going to say no. Because I'm a firm believer, at the end of the day, even though the rules dictate toward the offense that defense wins championships, Fred Warner has proven to me that he is the heart and soul, and he deserves every single penny that he gets in a front-loaded deal, which includes $34 million in guarantees, because he's $34 million overdue. And why did I say that? Well, you're going to have to watch that podcast in the description below to find out. But yeah, those who watch it, you know what I'm talking about. So if a deal presents itself, how does Lynch say no? That's the only question that I have, because he's going to be the one making that decision. That's what he gets paid millions of dollars to make. I'm glad I'm not the one making the decision, because it is a very difficult decision. But if I'm GM John Lynch, I'm not pulling the trigger. I would rather sit back, re-sign and retain my all-pro talent, and build through the draft. I'm going to find that quarterback that Kyle Shanahan wants in the draft. I know we missed on CJ Beathard, but I have faith in Kyle Shanahan that he knows his offense better than anyone, because it's his offense and he knows what he's looking for in the quarterback, and everybody makes mistakes, and let's go after and trade up for a player that we think is worthy to be a quarterback of the future of the San Francisco 49ers and be the heir apparent to Jimmy Garoppolo. That player to me is, you're going to have to stay tuned for my next Beast Rider podcast. Well, that'll be it for today. I hope you liked what I had to say. If you did, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, as I keep all things Beast. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Have a good night. Beast Rider out.